Hello, in this video I'll show you how to remove and replace the clutch on this Volkswagen Touran 1.6 petrol. The procedure is similar for other Volkswagen Tourans with different engines. The transmission on this car is located on the side of the engine. In order to replace the clutch, first we need to remove the transmission. First, we'll start by removing the engine cover and also the battery and the battery tray. If the video is useful, please like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel to see more videos like this. The battery tray is held by 3 bolts that we need to remove. Next, we need to remove the brake fluid line, which is right there. It's held by that clip, and then we need to pull it out. Also, we need to remove those gear linkages. This gear linkage is you need to press on the front and then push it out backwards, and the other gear linkage as well, and also those 3 bolts holding the gear linkages to the transmission. First, I'm going to get locking pliers and pinch the brake fluid hose so that when I remove the brake line from the slave cylinder, it's not going to leak. That's the brake fluid line out. Now I'm going to put it to the side and start removing the gear linkages. To remove that gear linkage, you just need to pry out the gear linkage with a screwdriver, and it comes out. The other gear linkage, there is a metal clip that you need to pull up and then push out, and it comes out, and then you can lift up the gear linkage. This is the metal clip that I'm talking about. You need to lift this part up and then pull it out. Next, I'm going to remove the 3 bolts holding the gear linkages to the transmission. That's the gear linkages separated from the transmission. Now I'm going to put them to the side. Next, I'm going to remove the starter motor. The starter motor is held by 2 bolts, one on top and one on the bottom. But first I'm going to remove the electrical connector and also the power cable, which is right there. Next I'm going to remove the two bolts holding the starter motor, but before removing the top bolt, first I need to remove this nut holding this ground cable. I remove the cable, and then behind it is the bolt that I'm going to remove. Now that the ground cable is removed, this is the bolt that is holding the starter motor, and now I'm going to remove that bolt. That's the top bolt for the starter motor removed. Now I'm going to remove a couple more bolts that hold the transmission to the engine, and then I'm gonna go underneath the car and remove the other bolt for the starter motor. First I'm going to remove these bolts holding the transmission to the engine. 1, 2, and then there is another one in there, just there. That's the 3 bolts holding to the engine to the transmission on top removed. Now I'm gonna go underneath the car and remove this engine under tray. Next I'm going to remove the lower bolt holding the starter motor. Before removing the lower bolt, first I need to remove that nut to remove this metal plate that's held onto that bolt. After I remove that plate, then I can remove the bolt and take out the starter motor. And that's the lower bolt of the starter motor out. Now I'm going to take out the starter motor. We can see the starter motor is not moving at all, so you might want to hit it with a hammer a little bit and it will come out. That's the starter motor separated. Now I'm going to take it out. Next, I need to remove the 2 CV axles that are on the transmission. The CV axle on the inside are held by 6 bolts. We also need to remove those ball joints and take out the CV axles. We'll start by removing the 2 wheels. Next, we're going to remove the bolts holding the CV axle to the wheel hub. Next, we're going to remove those 3 nuts holding the ball joint to the control arm and take out the control arm. Here we can see the control arm is separating from the ball joint, but we're not going to take it out completely. First we need to remove the inner bolts on the CV axle. But before removing the inner bolts on the CV axle, first I'm going to remove this wheel arch liner because we need to take it out anyway. These are all the bolts that we need to remove to take out the rear arch liner. Next, we're going to remove the 6 bolts holding the CV axle to the transmission. The socket that I'm using is M8 or M10. We put it into the bolt and then we're going to hammer it to make sure that it's all the way in. We're going to put a screwdriver into the brake disc like that, so that now when we try to turn to loosen the bolts, the CV axle is not going to turn. First we need to loosen all the bolts and then we're going to take them out one by one. Now that those 3 bolts are loosened, I'm going to take out the screwdriver and turn the CV axle so that the other bolts are in a position so that I can loosen them as well. Once I loosen all the bolts, I'm going to use an electric ratchet and just take out the bolts completely. Now that all the bolts are removed on the inner side of the CV axle, I'm going to take out the outer CV joint and then remove the whole CV axle. Now we're gonna go on the other side and remove the other CV axle. We're not going to remove it completely like we did the other one. We're just going to remove the inner bolts and separate it from the transmission. Removing those inner bolts is the exact same procedure as the other CV axle. Now that all the bolts are removed, that's the CV axle separated from the transmission. I'm going to separate the ball joint from the control arm by removing those three nuts, and so that I can move the whole wheel a little bit this way, so that there is more space in between the CV axle and the transmission, so that it's not in my way. But I'm not going to remove it completely, just leave it like that. Next, I'm going to remove this this transmission mount. Next, I'm going to start removing the bolts holding the transmission to the engine. These are all the bolts holding the transmission to the engine. There is one hidden bolt here just on top of the CV axle. Now I'm going to remove those two small bolts, and this last bolt I'm going to leave it for last. I'm going to remove that last bolt when just before removing the transmission. First I'm going to remove those two bolts. This exhaust pipe is in the way, so I'm not going to remove the exhaust pipe, just I'm going to remove them as much as possible, and then maybe after taking out the transmission a little bit, I'm going to remove them the rest of the way. Before removing the transmission, first I'm going to hold the engine with this engine jack here on top. I'm going to put it on and hold the engine, and then I'm going to remove the left engine mount, and then I'm going to try and take out the transmission. Now I'm going to take out the engine mount and also the engine mount support. The engine mount is held by 6 bolts. There is 4 bolts just underneath these wires. We need to move them to the side a little bit to take out the wires, and these are the 2 bolts. And then to remove this engine mount support, it's held by 3 bolts as well. First I'm going to move those wires to the side and take out the 4 bolts underneath. That's the engine mount out. Next I'm going to remove the bolts holding the engine mount support. That's the bolts holding the engine mount support out, and that's the engine mount support out. Now I'm going to lower the engine as much as possible to make it easier to take out the transmission from the bottom. Those 2 bolts that this exhaust pipe is in the way, I'm going to try to remove them as much as possible, try to loosen them as much as possible, and next I'm going to get a transmission jack underneath the transmission. I'm going to remove the last bolt holding the transmission to the engine, and then I'll try and take out the transmission. Now that all the bolts holding the transmission to the engine are removed, I'm going to take out the transmission. Maybe I'll use a pry bar just to separate it. And before taking it out completely, first I need to make sure that those two bolts that are in there are free from the transmission, and then I'm going to use the pry bar and take out the transmission completely. We can see the transmission separated from the engine, so now we're going to put it on a jack and just maybe wiggle it a little bit and it will come out. And that's the transmission out. Now we have access to the clutch. To remove the clutch, it's held by 6 or 7 bolts that we need to remove. And this is the gearbox right there. From here you can replace the bearing. To remove the clutch, these are all the bolts that we need to remove. When you try to loosen the bolts, the crankshaft will turn, so in order to keep the crankshaft from turning, I'm going to put a ratchet on the crankshaft, on the center bolt of the crankshaft pulley, and it will stop the crankshaft from turning, and this way I can remove all the bolts for the clutch. Now that all the bolts holding the clutch to the flywheel are removed, now I'm going to use a pry bar and pry out the clutch. And that's the clutch out. These are the two plates, friction plate and pressure plate. I'm going to replace both. Next I'm going to replace the bearing along with that fork. So first I need to remove them and then replace them. You can see that this bearing is in bits, so it's not we need to replace everything. First we're going to remove those two bolts holding this I don't know what it's called, this thing. I'm going to remove those two bolts and replace it. This is the new clutch kit that I'm going to replacing it with, and the part number is right there. And these are the new friction plate and pressure plate. Inside the box there is also this fork, this metal clamp, and also the center bearing. First I'm going to put this thing on and put on the two bolts and tighten them. Next I'm going to put the clamp onto this fork and then put on the fork in its place. Now I'm going to put some grease on. Don't put too much grease, just a little bit. And now I'm going to put on the bearing. Now I'm going to press it a little bit just to see if it's moving like it should be moving. Yeah, it all looks good. So the bearing and the fork are replaced. Now we're going to put on the new clutch. Before putting on the new clutch, first we need to center the friction plate and the pressure plate. This is the centering tool that I'm going to be using. I'm going to tighten the two plates together and center them, and then I'm going to put the clutch on the flywheel. I think it's centered now, so now I'm going to put it onto the flywheel and put the bolts on and tighten them. When you're putting on the bolts, make sure you tighten them evenly. Don't tighten them on one side and then the other side to be loose. Just tighten them evenly and then you have no problems. Next I'll show you in the service manual the tightening torques for the clutch pressure plate bolts. They are 30 Newton meters, and if the bolts are M7 then it's 20 Newton meters. Now that I tightened the bolts, now I'm going to remove this centering tool and I'm going to tighten the bolts now to specs. And that's the clutch now replaced. Now we're gonna go and check again if everything is alright here with the fork and the bearing. And if everything is alright, now I'm going to put on the transmission back on the engine. Putting the transmission on the engine is in the exact reverse order. First I'm going to lift it up with the transmission jack. And it's nice to have two people doing this job because the transmission is heavy. When the transmission is in its place, you need to wiggle it a little bit and it will go in eventually in its place. Once the transmission is in its place, then we can start tightening the bolts. First we start with those two bolts on the bottom that are where the exhaust pipe is in the way, and then we're going to put on the other bolts. Now I'm going to put on the side bolt, and when I put on the side bolt, you see how the transmission will go in all the way, and then we can assemble everything else in the reverse order. Hopefully the video was helpful. Please like and comment on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.